Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to an awesome webinar on mental resilience. I'm delighted to be here today with Diane McCabe and Graham Cowan. We have over 300 people with us today talking about listening about mental resilience. So this is very difficult times. We're all in agreement of that. So today is about practical takeaways and tips and techniques that Graham and Diane will give you guys. We also have a Q&A session at the end that we will be welcoming your questions, and we are going to be polling throughout the webinar to ensure that we get the most out of this hour and a quarter that's going to proceed. So a little bit about myself and my business. So my name is Victoria Butt. I'm the Managing Director and founder of Parity Consulting. We're a recruitment business that specialises in product marketing, comms and digital recruitment. Part of our differentiator as a recruitment company is that we spend 10% of our profits on complementary activities such as resilience and well-being. We train product managers. We trained over 120 product managers last year alone. And now couldn't be more important than reinvesting our time and energy into other people. Just before we start, just like to share a very quick story about a client of mine and a friend of mine that phoned me recently. She's quite a senior individual, and she explained to me how she feels that her career will not recover from or her career could be stunted by the work from home arrangements. She found herself sleeping a little bit too long, eating badly, not exercising. Her projects had all gone on hold, and the new way of working just wasn't suiting her. So we put together a bit of a strategy around how that could change for her, because of her seniority, she's certainly at risk from being stood down. She now gets up at the same time regardless every day, even though she's not commuting into work. She's using that time really effectively for exercising. She's meditating. She's putting her makeup on every day. She's putting her work attire on, even if she doesn't feel like it. All of her projects are on hold, which is very difficult for her. However, what's really what she's done really well is that she's come up with 5 different projects that she is given to her leadership team, and they are now choosing the ones that she will prioritize. She's also an extrovert and gets her energy from people. So she's now looking at a minimum of 3 VCs a day to ensure her energy is kept high. So just briefly, we're going to be hearing today from Graham Cowan and Diane McCabe, both of which are mental resilience experts. Very excited to hear about both of them. We recently held a mental resilience breakfast for over 130 people here in the city when we were able to be in the same room as each other. And Diane and Graham were the 2 most popular speakers at that breakfast event. So just before we go on to hearing from Graham and Diane, I'd just like to start with a quick poll to understand what you're finding most stressful about the COVID-19 crisis. That poll will come up on your screen in just one moment, and if I can ask you to fill that out, that would be great. So if you could pick maybe the top 3 that you're finding most stressful, that would be terrific. We are going to share these results at the end, and we are going to have a Q&A at the end where I'd urge you to pop your questions onto the Q&A section of Zoom. So moving on to a bit about Graham. Some of you may know Graham. He's one of the co-founders of Are You OK? He's also founded 2 businesses, Care 365 and Factor C. He is an ex-marketer, he's an ex-recruiter, he's written 4 books, and he also has personal experience with depression. Graham couldn't be busier and in demand. His presentation is full of facts and practical takeouts for you. What you may not know about Graham is that he used to be a boy soprano, and that he is an avid hiker, and he's hiked the Inca Trail and Base Camp, very jealous of that, and also lots of hikes in Tasmania. So over to you now, Graham.
Thanks, Victoria, and lovely to join everyone. It's an incredibly important time to really connect and to realise what's truly important to all of us. So thank you for setting aside that time to do that. Thank you for reminding me of being a great singer. Unfortunately, my voice broke and my career ended very early. So mental resilience is incredibly important, and I think we all feel a little bit like that lighthouse at the moment. As you can see from this picture and from my view, I have a little bit of grey hair, and I've been through, I guess, 3 major disruptions. I've been working in the workplace since 1987, when there was a big correction, the tech crash in 2000, and of course the GFC. And I'm sure it's not any consolation, but this has been by far the most profound, just in terms of its speed of happening. And I have a 90-year-old father, and he even talks to this as a faster impact than even around the war sort of thing, because it's just happened so incredibly quickly and it's affected us all. The topic today is around resilience. We think about resilience as growth as being really important, but I want to really step back and just really remind us that it all starts with care, and in particular self-care. And that's what I want to talk about today, and the importance that if we get self-care right, resilience happens by itself. We get resilience right, we can try new things, bounce back, learn, and move forward. So Victoria just asked you this question, and I did a webinar last week, whereas Victoria asked you to nominate just 3 options out of 6. I asked people last week in my webinar to just write an open-ended sentence, and I then ran a word cloud, and I think it's quite interesting when we look at this word cloud. So this is really from essentially less than a week ago. And as you can see, the big words are around uncertainty, isolation, and fear of unemployment. And whereas previously, as Victoria mentioned, I was involved in helping to start Are You OK? Well, that typically has been for the fragile or those who feel a bit vulnerable. But I think we all do. And I really commend Victoria and her team to put on an important initiative like this, because we can only get through it together. But I want to really touch on content that relates to isolation, uncertainty, and unemployment, because there's many things we can and can't control, but there's things we can control. And it's what we can do each day that I really want to focus on. And always good to have a tool, and I talk about the moodometer. And I think it'd be fair to say there'd be very, very few people thriving in this time at the top of the green zone. But I think what we can do is to strive, to be, striving for the green zone. And it's interesting to know about our mood and what contributes to it. Research by Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky tells us that our mood is influenced by 3 factors. The first is our genetics, and that contributes 50%. We can't really change that. The next is the events, and I must admit they're more normal events, and I'd say this is a little bit outside normal, but just the same. They contribute 10%, and we have very, very little control over what's happening with COVID-19 in the world. We can only control what we do each day. But the final bit, 40%, is our intentional actions. And that's what I really want to encourage you all to think about. What are the things we can choose to do each day which can boost our mood, push us in the green zone? Because we are in the green zone, we're more productive, more innovative, more resourceful, more energetic, and just in better shape. So think of ourselves as, being out there in the world. I want to talk about creating a culture of care. And this comes down to 3 elements. And the first is self-care. One of the things I really want to emphasize today is that self-care isn't selfish. I'm going to be talking also very briefly about crew care, because how we work with each other is also really paramount to our own well-being. And thirdly, the red zone care. Now, sadly, Beyond Blue have already found that the traffic to their articles about COVID-19 are 700% higher than the bushfires at the start of the year, if you can believe that. So if we get self-care and crew care right, we get growth. if we get true care and red zone care, we get resilience. And that's what we're really striving about today. But we also want to think about this. Self-care and red zone care, we know how to help those who may be struggling. We know how to help reduce risk. These aren't nice to have. These are business critical if we want to come out of this in a better place and stronger than we were before. So as we mentioned at the start, I went through profound depression, wrote a series of books. And in this book you see before you, I also surveyed over 4,000 people to find out what worked best in their recovery. And I want to share some of the insights that came from that assessment. So self-care and self-care isn't selfish. Now, I just took this photo of Victoria with her two young kids this morning in front of her monitor. I didn't really, that's what I just found. But I think what can we do each day? And I want to just propose 7 really practical tips. The first is only read COVID-19 updates from trusted sources. Now, if you're looking for 2 that I recommend, it's the Federal Health Department of Australia. They're putting out a COVID-19 update every day where you know the latest. The second place is Safe Work New South Wales have a dedicated Safe Work New South Wales page to mental health. So it's got information there about, you know, all the awards, all the latest things related to the workplace, the obligations to the workplace, all on one page. So a great place to go. Second thing, try and restrict looking at the news to just 2 times per day. If we look at the news sites, the top 10 things are about COVID-19, but they're micro updates. It doesn't dwell us. It doesn't serve us to dwell on this. Try to create a routine. If you're not used to working at home, try to stick to a schedule. Decide on a start time and a stop time. As Victoria shared at the start with that story about her friend, helping to get that ritual in place really helps our well-being. And I really encourage people to work, and all the research on productivity engagement shows this. We are much better off to work in pulses. And so you might work anything from a 20-minute to a 45-minute dose. I use a timer, a kitchen timer, and when it's ticking away, that's when I work, I focus. When it goes off, I get up, I breathe, I stretch, I move around. Set regular times to reach out to a teammate. So if you have a teammate that could be alone or you know could be a bit vulnerable, just either call them, send them a micro reach out, a text, show that you care, reach out and ask how they're going. Schedule a work date. So, you know, earlier this morning I had a morning coffee with 10 mates via Zoom. We all drank our coffee in front of each other. So I've had a Friday afternoon drinks at home. So there's many ways how we can stay connected. It's not perfect, but it's way better than just trying to wing it by ourselves. And finally, take a lunchtime walk in nature. You know, even I managed to get out for a 40-minute walk prior to this, because if we do have a brisk walk, our mood is, just for 30 minutes, our mood is better for up to 12 hours later. So that's the general thing about COVID-19 and working from home. I want to now talk about self-care. And as you'll see, some of the things I talk about in self-care I've already covered in those 7 mental health facts. But just thinking more broadly for this moment, but also moving forward, the 3 elements include vitality, which is our physical health. The second one is intimacy, or our emotional health. And the third one is prosperity, or our contribution health. So we need to top up each of those glasses. You know, it's like those glasses are sitting outside in the sun, it evaporates. And so we have to think about how do we consciously top up each of those 3 glasses to remain more robust and resilient. So we'll go through them one by one. So as I mentioned, vitality is about our physical health, it's about our exercise, it's about resting well, it's about eating well. If we do take time out for exercise, as I mentioned before, Mayo Clinic research tells us that our mood is better 2 hours later, up to 12 hours later. And one of the wonderful developments, I'm not sure around your place, but yesterday around my place, and I live on the North Shore of Sydney, there was all sorts of kids and families walking. It was wonderful. It was just like, I don't know, it was like another era. It was fantastic to see. So get outside, get some vitamin D, put an emphasis on resting well. Listen to relaxing music before you go to bed. Listen to a meditation. Really ease up. And try to eat well. It's easy to binge eat. It's easy to eat badly, but stock up with fresh fruit and vegetables. Ironically, it's easy to get, might not be easy to get toilet paper, but it's easy to get fresh fruit and vegetables. So make sure you make that a priority. The second element, so vitality is the V, intimacy is the I. And this is the most important part of our well-being. In fact, the longest well-being study ever done is called the Harvard Grant Study, where they covered 300 people for over 75 years. And the conclusive research shows, and there's a TED talk on this, that those that have the longest life, the healthiest life, the lowest stress, the most affluent, the longest sex life, are those that have caring and supportive relationships. But this doesn't happen by themselves. We have to invest time. And so how do we know those people that are our scaffolding, that are good for us? As you read those two questions and that statement, who comes to mind? Who comes to mind? For some people, it may be 1, 2, 3 or 4 people. But my next question is, as you think about those people, are you seeing them enough? Are you hearing from them enough? And it doesn't have to be in person anymore. As I mentioned, there's many ways to catch up for a drink or a coffee via Zoom or Hangout or Skype, whatever works for you. But try to make time during a week to do that. And I'll share in a moment a tool that can help make that happen. Now, while we're here, I'll just share that we have got a Q&A at the end, as Victoria mentioned. So feel free to just type in questions as we go along. We're going to come to the end. We will come to the questions. So if you have something, please reach out. Now, I know how hard it is because I spent 5 years chronically depressed, 5 years when I wasn't working, 5 years where I had no hope. And what I found is that there's little steps that make the difference. Little steps. Try to think just one day or 1 week at the most, and I'll share in a moment some tools to help make us do that. The third element, so it was V for vitality, I for intimacy, P for prosperity. And this is our contribution area. Now, when I do a normal presentation, I normally do 45 minutes on just self-care. I talk about things like knowing your purpose, using your strengths. But I want to share something which I think is really critical right now, and it's 100% within our control. And that is to have a sense of gratitude. Martin Seligman, probably the real pioneer of positive psychology in the world, did this study which showed that if we, at the end of each day, we put a pad beside our bed, and no matter what we've done that day, we write down just 3 things we're grateful for. Doesn't matter how small it is. It could be, going for a great walk outside with your child. It could be seeing, a beautiful flower. It could be having a really authentic talk with a teammate or a client. But no matter what day you've had, write down those 3, because humans have negativity bias. We remember negative things more than positives. And so this helps to reset our brain and to focus on what's going right. And there's very, very good reasons for doing that. Martin Seligman said that if we do this for 7 days in a row, that is, write down 3 things at the end of our day, that way that our mood is better for up to 6 months later. It can reset our brain. So something very easy to take away in these really tumultuous times. So we're back again to the start. And as I said, I encourage people to act like a VIP. And acting like a VIP is making sure you top up those things each day. Start the day with thinking, what good can I do for myself? What am I going to do about my physical health? How can I fit that in? Let's schedule it in a diary. And Diane will share with you in a moment about how you can put together a weekly schedule. Next one, intimacy. Who can I reach out to? Ask, are you okay to? Never before I was involved in helping to start it, and we've wonderful to see how it's grown in the last 10 or 11 years, we have never needed it more. But we also need to ask ourselves, am I okay, as well as outreach? But think about who you can reach out to, who you can show you care. It's a bit different not being there live. If you're on a video call, look for language, listen to tone of voice, try to make the person feel understood. And finally, prosperity. What is the most productive thing I could do for work today? What is the most useful thing I could do today? I love the story that Victoria shared at the start, where she helped her friend identify useful things to do, helpful things to do. And doing that, working on that, increases our well-being. It's finding a sense of purpose in all this chaos. So really, I encourage you to consider asking yourself, how can I be useful? I love Benjamin Franklin, probably one of the most productive people we've ever come across. I'm just reading his autobiography. He used to get up at 5 a.m. every day, and his first question was, what good am I going to do today? I love that question. Then at 6 o'clock he reviews it. So what good are you going to do today, and then tomorrow, and the day after? Just one day at a time. So this is a tool which might help you choose what to focus on. And if this is of interest to you, just take a photo of that URL at the bottom. That's how you can access it for free from my thing. And not only do you get these sheets, there's also a series of short emails with videos that tell you how to use it. So the first one is Self-Care Snapshot, VIP Snapshot. And as you can see, it goes through each of the 3 areas: vitality, intimacy, and prosperity. There are 5 questions in each of those areas. We rate ourselves out of 10 and total up each of those 3 categories. So each of them is out of 50. Whatever is the lowest, that's the one I encourage you to think about. How am I going to fill up that cup? What do I need to put in place to fill up that cup? The second one is a weekly planner. And this might work well with another planner that Diana is going to share soon. But this allows you on a Sunday to think about, okay, what am I doing about my exercise this week? What am I doing about my sleep and rest? What am I doing about my care crew, the people that are good for me? What am I doing about my work? And to be able to write down just 3 of those things in each of those categories that really help. You might also consider asking, what's going to be my growth learning? Henry Ford once said, doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 80, if you stop learning, you're old. And so we need to stay in the green zone. We need to learn new things to be ready to emerge from this in sharper and more agile than we were before. As I said, I want to touch briefly on crew care, and this is a very, very fast track through, but a friend of mine, Bernie, who I have a ritual every Sunday here in Alistair, we typically run along Curl Beach, although we're not doing that anymore because it's too crowded and the beach is a band. But we met this time up at Tarramurra and walked in the bush. And Bernie is a very successful entrepreneur. He has a virtual team of 10 people, 10 developers in the Philippines, developing a arbitrage system for cryptocurrencies. It just makes my head hurt thinking what he does. But in the last 8 months, Bernie has had 10-minute stand-up meetings at 8:30 in the morning, and these are quite brilliant. So he just asked 4 questions. First question is, are you okay? Is your family okay? How are you feeling about this crisis? How are you doing? This shows you care. And showing you care is the most productive thing you can do for your teammates. Gallup research shows that those that strongly agree with my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person, that is the strongest performance of a person's engagement, productivity, discretionary effort. So great reason to ask, are you okay, particularly in this environment? And I'll talk a moment about how we can better ask, are you okay? Second one, what did you get done yesterday? Now, if you're familiar with the work of Therese Umberley, she wrote the book called The Progress Principle. She's from Harvard, a Harvard psychologist, and she shows overwhelmingly that we are most innovative, we are most energetic when we feel we're making progress on meaningful work. And so this allows everyone on the team to nominate one thing they've done. It's a time for a virtual high five. It's a time for commiserations if things didn't work out. But always remember that making little steps of progress is the most energizing thing we can do for our workmates and those around us. Third step is, what is your number one goal today? What will make this day fantastic if you do it? And again, this provides a sense of purpose, a sense of focus for people to really think about going ahead. And then the fourth one, are there any impediments to your number one goal? You know, is your work server not coping with everyone being at home? You know, I know, for example, that, one ANZ suddenly sent 30,000 people home on one day. So how are things coping? So to be able to brainstorm each other and come up with these little things that can help everyone to achieve their number one goal. And finally, helping people in the red zone. How do we support a teammate in distress? And if you'd like a copy of that, you can download that from my website at the bottom there. But it's about identifying someone that's struggling, showing compassion, asking, are you okay? Helping them access experts, be it a doctor, a psychologist, an employee assistance program. Knowing that work is good for them. They're better off being connected with their work colleagues than working by themselves. I 100% guarantee that. I've been home for 5 years without connection with workmates. I can tell you it's pretty horrible. It seems like Mount Everest trying to get back. And finally, exercise. Can you encourage them to get out and just have a 30-minute brisk walk? Or if they're just really paralyzed, to encourage them to put their joggers on and get to the post office. Not the post office, sorry, the mailbox. The mailbox. Post office is too far. The mailbox. And also consider doing virtual solutions for remote teams. You know, I've been doing a series of webinars, like in some organizations in the transport industry. I'm doing some for self-care, crew care, red zone care, 3 separate things. Some are doing combined ones. We're also looking at innovative e-learning packages where people can learn in 20 minutes how 94% of them are more confident to help other people. So if you'd like to know more about these programs and how they work, please just reach out to me on LinkedIn. It is very natural to feel stressed. It is very natural to feel out of control. It is very natural not to be on top of things. And as I mentioned, I went through profound depression for 5 years. I 100% believed that I wouldn't recover. And what eventually got me through it was a couple of things. I think one was to really start focusing just on the day ahead, and at the most a week ahead. And that's where my whole VIP planner began. Thinking about the week and then just one day at a time, just one day at a time. And finally, it was about being helpful or useful. And Victoria shared her story. For me, what really got me out of my profound depression was writing my first book, Back from the Brink. And I felt I was doing something useful, not just for me, but for thousands of people that, you know, struggle with depression or anxiety. So I look forward to your questions. Please write them in the Q&A section in your panel below. But I really urge you to be caring, be helpful, and go for the growth zone.
Thank you, Graham. That was awesome. I've now seen you speak about 3 or 4 times, and it never gets old. Just a couple of things that I took from that is the small daily rituals, that intention and those actions to boost energy. We do something at Parity because we're in the recruitment game. We've seen a lot of our work fall off or go on hold, and so it's my team are under pressure, and they're homeschooling their kids, and they've got lots of different pressures. So what we do in our daily stand-up is we do a 1-word opener. We say what we're grateful for, and we also talk about our intent for the day. So very similar to your friend there. So I'd like to move on to introducing Diane McCabe. Diane's a fabulous woman. She's a change coach facilitator and speaker. Diane works with businesses and global leaders to activate personal responsibility so that leaders can adapt and thrive in this era of constant change. Spent 20 years in corporate, and what you possibly don't know about Diane is, despite appearances, she is an avid heavy metal fan, and although she has taken some of the largest organisations through complex change, she often struggles to get her 9-year-old daughter out the door on time for school. Although I'm sure that is no longer a problem, Diane. So over to Diane.
Thanks, Victoria. Yes, I'm struggling, like I think a lot of parents are right now, with the whole home and online learning. So juggling work, life, and being a teacher all at once. So definitely have a huge appreciation for everyone who is a teacher. Today, I want to talk to you about being fit for change. So as Graham and Victoria have already spoken about, one of the things that we are all grappling with at the moment is lots of change has hit us in one time, and we have a bit of a distance to go. So I want to really focus on being fit for change. The elements today are taken from workshops and speaking engagements that I do in corporate organizations. So there is definitely a corporate slant in it, but I will be sharing things that will be applicable to most people. So just to give you an idea of the framework, and I won't get a chance to go through all of this today, but basically, when we are being hit by change, that is when our resilience is tested. We are absolutely tested to the max. So building change and resilience within our organizations needs to start at the individual level. So for each individual, if we can build change capability, if we can build resilience within them, then that will filter through to our teams, and our teams will filter through to our organization as a whole. And if we have good capability in both change and resilience, that will improve our overall performance across our teams and through to our organization. Today, because of the amount of time that we've got, being about 20 minutes thereabouts, I'm going to focus primarily on individual, but feel free, if there are some questions that you want to ask around team or organization, please pop them just in the chat window down below. So as I said, we're in this huge time of transformational change, and that change is in progress. And a lot of organizations are used to doing huge transformational programs. They are rolling out ERP systems, they are doing restructures, they are doing mergers, acquisitions. But right now, every organization is being impacted by change, and not change that they have decided to go forward with themselves. It's change that's being inflicted upon them. But we bring that down to a level of our communities and our families. Our schools are going through transformation. And if you look at how we've actually mobilized all of our learning to becoming, online, and everybody is sitting at home with their little Zoom calls and their Google Classrooms, it's absolutely phenomenal how we've been able to respond to that change in such a short space of time. But with change comes stress, and a lot of stress at the moment. And I may be smiling, but yep, I'm feeling the stress too. But stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension that results from adverse or demanding circumstances. And I think we've got those adverse and demanding circumstances in bucket loads at the moment. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about stress, because a lot of us think of, stress as being something that, we're tearing our hair out, it's really difficult, but stress is also something good. So this is the Yerkes-Dodson stress curve. And basically what it does, it checks performance. So how do we perform and how do we function in relation to stress that's applied to us? So over here, we've got, if our performance is pretty low if we don't have a lot of stress applied. But then we move into, if you've ever had that feeling where you're firing on all cylinders, then this is where we're heading to peak performance. And if I think back to maybe 6 weeks ago, a lot of us probably were doing that. We were refreshed after Christmas. We're all, tackling new projects, new opportunities, and really sitting up here almost at peak performance. But then The thing about stress is that we cope really well with stress until we don't. And there's a tipping point where we tip over and we can likely fall into fatigue, which people who speak about change talk about change fatigue, but also then that can slip into exhaustion, panic, anxiety, anger, and then burnout and breakdown. So for me, just on a personal note, I have suffered with anxiety and depression since I was a teenager. So I've gotten used to ups and downs throughout my life. But in 2016, I really was what is considered to be high functioning anxiety. So I was up here at this real tip point where I was performing on all cylinders, but I didn't realize that I was starting to go down this slippery slope towards burnout. And I couldn't see it because once you move over into the tipping point, you actually then start to feel fatigued, but your decision making, your planning ability, your world starts to get a lot smaller and you actually collapse in on yourself. You stop reaching out to people, you get exhausted, so you're either spending a lot of time sleeping or not sleeping. I did suffer with panic attacks, which was one of the main reasons I ended up going to my doctor. But I ultimately ended up having a total burnout and breakdown and ended up right down here in this red zone that I know somewhat correlates to what Graham was sharing with us earlier. But it takes a long time to build yourself back up that steep hill to get back into this really optimal stress level where you're firing on all cylinders. For me, it started with a conversation that I had with a friend, a conversation I had with my husband, with my doctor, with my HR professionals at work, and with my manager. And little by little, more and more conversations, more and more building my own resilience, I started to bring myself back up. And when I came through that, I started looking at, okay, I've learned and I have lived in this zone of being firing on all cylinders, but I've also been down here at burnout and breakdown. So what have I learned? And one of the biggest things that I learned is that there is a danger zone that we approach. So as we are firing on all cylinders and we think we are going great guns, all of a sudden we're starting to get fatigued, but there's just one more project, one more meeting, one more initiative that we just have to do. And we push and push and push until we start going over the hill. So understanding here in this danger zone, what are some of those things for you that when you're starting to get stressed, overly stressed, and getting into that fatigued area, what are some of the things you do? For me, I started isolating. I stopped connecting with my friends. I stopped having lunch out with friends. I kept having it at my desk. I literally was closing in on myself, spending way too many hours in the office, and just really not coping well. My exercise stopped. My ability to be an effective parent was severely diminished. My ability to make good decisions at work was starting to be diminished as well. So understand for yourself and take a little bit of time to think about what are some of those triggers that might happen for you. So if you take a little bit of time today, bearing in mind everything that's going on, where would you plot yourself on this curve? Are you here in the optimal zone? Are you tipping over here into fatigue? Maybe you are someone who was fatigued already and you're moving a little bit further down. But my overall learning on this was about taking personal responsibility for my mental health and well-being. So I make sure that I put myself first. And Graham spoke about self-care, and I will speak about that in a moment. But what I want to encourage you to do is to make micro changes for macro impact. So for yourself right now, there is so much huge change happening. We're all working from home. We can't see our friends. We can't hug some of our loved ones. We can't even take the dog for a walk without having to think about social distancing. We're running out of, basic supplies like toilet paper. All of these things bring stress. but think about what are some of the micro changes that you can bring into your life that will start to top you back up. So take some time to consider about work-life balance. So if we look back again, 6 weeks ago, we were thinking, okay, work and life were very distinct from each other. Now they're starting to get closer, and there's like a fuzzy edge here between the two, because we're working from home. For many of us in the corporate sector, we're now working from home. So therefore, the day of work and life are being melded into one. But what keeps the balance in check is actually that ability to look after ourselves, to do that self-care, to keep the oxygen mask on. So have a think to yourself right now, and feel free to take a screenshot if there isn't enough time. And I know that you may be distracted by a child at the moment, or you may have the dog around your ankles, whatever it might be, but just think about your waking hours. So how much time are you currently spending at work for your waking hours? How much time are you spending on yourself? And how much time are you spending on life? And if you look at both of these, the work and the life, they are things that are giving time to others, whereas care for self is very much spending time on yourself. And we know that that is what's pivotal to keeping us in balance. Then think about how much time you would like to spend on each domain. And for a lot of people right now, we probably do want to spend a little bit more time to ourselves, because that 1 hour we may have gotten at the gym is now no longer able to do it because we're juggling kids along with work responsibilities. Or maybe you're doing conference calls at different times of the day due to global time zones. Then think through what are some of the major barriers. What's stopping you? In a lot of cases, it may be just a conversation that you need to have with a family member or with a manager. But be courageous, have that conversation and find some time for yourself. And then think about what are some of the micro changes that you can do to close the gap. And I will talk through some of these in a moment. But I do want to make note that if you're a person who has recently lost their job, then you're finding yourself with a lot of time for self, then maybe you need to spend a little bit more time in thinking, how can I be of service in a way that maybe not be financially rewarding right now, but at least I'm getting some degree of fulfillment from work. If you're someone who lives alone, then maybe you need to spend more time being connected to other people. So spending time more figuring out, how do I connect to people? How can I stay in touch? So take a screenshot of that if you want to work through it. And I'll walk through some other examples. So I want to encourage you throughout your day to take 10. And take 10 means taking 10 minutes at different times throughout your days. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but go for a walk or a run. Now, for some people, and I know some of them who have worked with me in organizations that I'm currently working with, that walk up and down their hallway or walk up and down the stairs. So go for a walk or a run. In general, if you do 10 minutes, if you can motivate yourself to do 10 minutes, you're likely to do a little bit more. Call a friend, play some music, like play Pharrell Happy, and I'm sure it will shift your mood. Play a game with your kids, just spend some time one-on-one with them. Eat a nourishing snack, enjoy a cuppa, do some meditation, but find things that fuel your tank, that lift your spirits, and take 10 minutes a number of times throughout the day. Adapt your schedule is one of the most important things. The schedule we had 6 weeks ago is not the schedule we have today. Think of doing 20-minute meetings instead of a 30-minute meeting, 45 minutes instead of an hour. Do one-on-one check-ins with your team, just even if it's for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be the traditional, here's the 1 hour in the calendar. Block out time for yourself to do doing time. Otherwise, you could find that you're in meetings all day, every day. As Graham mentioned, have a virtual cuppa or have a glass of wine with some colleagues or some friends, but just find ways to interact with each other in an informal way. Also think about how much sleep you're getting, because if you're not fueling the core of your engine with good quality sleep, then it's very difficult for you to make those decisions. It's very difficult for you to be there for your team and for your family. Look at ways of having quality family time. I've recently set up a Facebook group with my family back home in Ireland, and we're now all sharing photographs with terrible haircuts from the 80s, all of our growing up photographs, our parents getting married. Find ways of connecting your elder family members, and doing that through Facebook groups is a wonderful way. So just a reminder that we are all going through this together. So transformation is in progress right now, and we are only at the early stages. And there's a difficult factor that we do need to think in. We're living in the world at the moment of statistics, and statistics seem like they're out there in the future. They're not necessarily touching us right now, but as people start to lose their jobs, as we have financial impacts within our families, and as people start to get ill and potentially pass away that are close to us, we need to start building our resilience as much as we possibly can and preparing for the long haul of change. So build your foundations as an individual so you can support your team and your organization. Proactively manage your stress and look out for that danger zone. Look for ways of having micro changes. Take 10 minutes throughout your day at multiple times and adapt your schedule so you've got time for work, for life, and for yourself. And keep up the communication. Make sure that as a leader, as a husband, as a wife, as a parent, as a human, that you're constantly connecting with people. And think to yourself, have conversations about how do you want to emerge from coronavirus and from the global pandemic. How do you want to be remembered at this time in terms of your leadership capability and as a parent? And back to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Diane. As always, just like with Graham, that was fantastic. Just want to share a couple of takeaways from my side. I think taking personal responsibility for self-care is the critical one. We take so much time for our families and our clients at the moment, and what I'm finding in our community, in sort of chief marketing officers and product management, is that people are working for longer. They feel quite worried about their productivity when they're trying to homeschool or they're trying to come up with their new routine, and they're so desperately worried about productivity that actually they're working longer. And I feel certainly concerned about my team, who are all juggling so many things themselves. I like also the dancing one. I think I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they are the only ones that can make me dance like a child now. So thank you so much for that. Just like to move to Q&A now. In fact, let's just hear about the poll results from the original poll this morning. Just before we took a poll, just asking you what you were most kind of stressed about with COVID-19, and the poll results will be on your screen now. So 76% uncertainty and 43% productive and distractions at home and not being able to see your friends. So really interesting results there. So Graham, if we could go to you for the first question, if I may, how do you think financial services does in terms of their mental health support compared to other industries?
I would say that, the financial services industry has been hammered before COVID-19. Of course, there's been the Royal Commission. And I did a lot of work, or I have done a lot of work, at the big banks, insurance companies, smaller banks. And I know that there was, almost a lot of grief before this even occurred, because many people didn't like what was conveyed in the Royal Commission, didn't feel that they contributed to it. So I think it was a pretty, not a great starting point. Having said that, I think that some have done some very good work in this. I know, for example, that, and I'm not sure if they still do this, but I know that 6 years ago, the CBA included in their engagement survey each year about, if I had a mental health issue, would I feel comfortable discussing it with my manager? And what was really fascinating about those results, and I'm speaking historically, I'm not sure if they're even measuring it now or what was, but the area where there was most stigma was at the general manager level, and also at HR, believe it or not. There was a lot of stigma at that particular level. And so what this means, I think, is that team leaders in particular and managers have to really realise and own that the well-being and the resilience of their team, they have a huge amount of control over. And some of the little practices that you shared, Victoria, about, the one word you ask people to nominate, the 4 questions which Bernie talked about, these are much more important than organisational policies or services. Of course, having those things helps, but the thing we can control is what we do in each team. And quite frankly, that will have the fastest results. So that would be my recommendation for everyone. Just ask, how can we as a team support each other and get through this together? And maybe just tap into what resources could be available through the organisation, but don't just depend on those. Take ownership yourself.
Thank you, Graham. And just like to move on to a question for Diane. Diane, how can leaders support their people in as part of their organisation?
I think there's a lot of ways leaders can support their people in their organizations, but I'd like to break it into 2 different elements. So first of all, I think it's really important that in times of uncertainty, and we saw it come out there in the poll, that when times are uncertain, people are calling out for information. So communicate as much as you possibly can with your people. You don't need to know all of the answers. You don't need to declare everything, but let people know that you're working through it in a methodical way, and send out daily updates, or have a stand-up meeting or a face-to-face engagement where you can see people over a video conference. Because if you're not communicating with your people, then they will fill in the blanks. And generally at a time when we're tipping over into that stressed area, we're starting to think worst case scenario. So is my job, under threat? Are there going to be redundancies? How am I going to cope? Maybe I won't be able to get my performance review. All of those sorts of things are coming to the fore. But also in terms of communication and communicating out, it's really important that that's the short-term horizon, but managers need to move out of managing and more into leading as we go through this. So really thinking about how can you be creative about how you repurpose your staff. So maybe it's a case of, instead of making redundancies, is there a 4-day week? Is there a 3-day a week? Is there part-time? Is there job sharing? All of these things that I guess have been pushing to meet to the top of the agenda for a while could find a home as we go through this transformational change. But keep the lines of communication open and be creative about what you're doing in the workplace.
Thank you, Diane. And just looking at some of the questions, we've got loads of questions coming through, which is awesome. Just wanted to just ask Graham, one of the questions came through is, you're suggesting working in 45-minute chunks. How long do you leave it in between those chunks?
Yeah, really good question. I generally try and take a 15-minute break. And so that's getting up, it's walking around, but it might be also making a phone call. It could be a work phone call, it could be a home phone call, but just something completely different. And I think there's something really energizing about being upright, making a phone call, or even walking, walking outside, or little things even to do around the house. Like I happen to love the garden. I've got a Balinese garden, so I go out and pull a couple of weeds and that sort of thing. But it just serves to, just have that break. And there's a wonderful book by Tony Schwartz, where he talks about engagement and productivity. And that's where I first got the idea about the importance of working in pulses. you know, we think we can work consistently. All the evidence shows that we're best off to work intensively, take a break, do something different, work intensively.
Great, thank you, Graham. Just there's been some questions around the recording and the slides. So the main slides that are from Parity will be available, and also there will be a recording that will be sent round. So you please do share that with your teams. Just to move to another question, someone has come through and asked how to transition from speaking and training live to Zoom calls, and what recommendations do you have engaging through Zoom versus, of course, face-to-face? If this go to Graham.
It's very relevant at the moment, and I'll just offer a couple of tips that I've found. Basically, you tend to need more slides, but mainly visual slides to keep people interested and involved. If you can have, you know, transitions, like you'll notice in this thing today, we've had a poll, we've broken it up, we've done something different, we come to the Q&A. So having little segments is also very, very helpful. And if you're looking for the technical side of Zoom and how best to do that, the Professional Speakers Association of Australia, 2 people on there, Warwick Murray and Donna Hanson. They've recently done a 1-hour YouTube video on how to do exactly what the question is about, how to better transition to Zoom. So that would be a great place to look at. You'll also find, if you go to YouTube and just put in, you know, how do you make Zoom more impactful, you'll find videos there. But Warwick and Donna are really real experts. So in fact, I'm doing a webinar with Warwick tomorrow night for the and so they know their stuff, and so that would be one I would really recommend. It's an hour long and well worth your time.
Thank you, Graham. And back over to you, Di. We've had a question come through about your breakdown. Did you find that people were supportive in your journey after your breakdown? And do you think your own journey made it easier for people to reevaluate their own mental health?
Yeah, I think it was difficult for me at first to talk about it, because I was going through it myself. So there was a small number of people who knew what was going on with me, but yeah, within, I think it was 18 months, I went back to the organization that I had been working at, because I had this compelling need that, okay, I have been going through all of this change, I have come out the other side of it, and I felt that I wanted to go back and share some of those learnings so people knew that they weren't alone, that, you know, a fellow colleague had a breakdown, has mental illness, but a lot of people didn't realize that. So I went back in on Are You OK Day, and gave a speech to my former workplace, and the amount of people who didn't know anything about it, that what I had been going through. So I'm very open about it now, and I really do encourage people to have as many courageous conversations as you possibly can, and really look to people who are sharing before you. So for me, Graham was someone that I had looked up to on LinkedIn before we'd ever met, and he was part of inspiring me to go out and share my story as well. But I think it's the rawness and the reality of what you've been through that really resonates with people, and those learnings that you come through with that help people out. So please speak up, be vulnerable. It actually comes back to reward you. There will be people that will help you out, that will always support you on your path.
Thank you, Diane. Just another question from the audience here. How big do you think digital is going to be once we come on the other side of this crisis? Maybe to you, Graham.
Yeah, if I can, I've just, the irony is that I've never been busier. And, you know, you could say that, you know, webinars are digital, but also e-learning is digital. Learning to work from home is digital, and I think it will massively change. So I think that is an element which, like so many people have said to me, because, you know, I've worked from home, or 50% of the week from home for a long time. So I've been very familiar with this, but my wife, who has a very busy role, she manages 90 people in a cancer research division. She's been saying this week, oh, this Microsoft Teams works really well. I should have been doing this further. And so she's worked out the real advantages of doing this, that there are real benefits all through learning the digital stuff. But the other element that I really hope will change is this sense of culture change and care, and realizing what's important and what's really important about productivity. Because I think in this lead up to this, we're all been busy and hectic and frantic, but have we really been productive, every minute of every hour? And I think one of the true potential upsides of this is just reflecting on what can we do better going forward from this? How can we work better as a team? Because all the research shows, and these are from the most digital savvy organizations like Google and IDEO, the most successful teams are those that have high psychological safety. And they have high psychological safety. What that means is strong interpersonal trust and respect. People are comfortable being themselves. Diversity is rewarded. So that's the twin benefit I really hope comes from this, is embracing what digital offers, but also just truly realizing that if we work better together, we support each other, we're going to be much, much better at this stuff longer term.
Thank you, Graham. Appreciate that. Now we're just going to move into a quick poll just before we take a final couple of questions. So the poll will come up on your screen in just a moment. What additional areas of support or resources do you think would be beneficial to you at this time? This is a really great question to ask, because we can circulate the results with you, and that can be something you can use with your leadership team and with your peers. So that poll will come up in a moment. If you just pick just the one main area, that would be great. Thank you. So we're just going to move to the final couple of questions. This one was brought up at a breakfast that we did recently with Graham and Diane, and I'm really pleased that it's come up again. How would you approach someone who thinks that you think that they need mental resilience or some mental support, but they perhaps don't realize it or may be in denial? And that to you, Graham.
Yeah, well, this is probably one of the most common issues that's raised with Are You OK? And so you can't lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But what we suggest, I guess, a couple of things. Firstly, is not be afraid to say that, is it okay if I revisit you, next week? I'm just a bit concerned because of this, and specifically note the things that you're concerned about. The second thing is to really think, knowing that person, who are they close to? Could I have a word to them about asking their friend, someone they might relate to better, who feel more confident, who there's higher trust with, to do that as well. And don't be afraid to revisit. I think one of my favorite Are You OK videos is an actual true story between, I think his name is Justin and Tom. So Justin was the employee, Tom was the boss. And they just sort of talked through, their experience of Tom helping Justin. And Justin actually says that it wasn't the first time, it wasn't the second time, not even the third time that Tom asked, are you okay? But on the seventh time, and he says that, I'm not sure if that was, but that's what he says. On the seventh time, I just thought to myself, I can't take it anymore. I've got to share this. And so don't be afraid to revisit it. Revisit it, with the right intent, with compassion, and wanting to be of service.
Thank you, Graham. And just like, if we can share the poll results now from that poll just a moment ago. So people are really looking for personal resilience and effective communication. Not too surprised with that. Just a couple of time for final questions now. In terms of a person's come in and said, how can we suggest our friends and our peers in our network stop creating panic by sharing opinions, not facts, about COVID-19? And if that could go to Diane.
That's a really good question, because on any change program, that is one of the things that a leader or a change manager is tasked with. It's and this is where, when we're not getting the right communication, we fill in the blanks and we just start building and building and building a lot of the communications that goes around this. So for me, what I always encourage people is, first of all, start with a guiding principle within the organization to say, we will only speak in terms of facts or something that's a feeling in relation to you. Ask, does this serve my team, my group? Is this something that I'm, purposefully moving forward with, that's going to help us all move forward? Now, in this particular circumstance, what we don't want to do is cut people off from having conversations when they're starting to reach out to us. So at the moment, there's probably that little bit of a tricky place where someone may be talking about a lot of negative news or a lot of things that are negative that they're hearing and they're consuming. Try to listen as best you can, but turning it more to the positive, having people focus on what is good in their life, and not brushing things under the carpet to be positive all the time, but being more optimistic in nature. If you can sit down with your team, and it will have to be in a virtual environment, or come up with a mandate across the organization to say that communication in relation to this will be beneficial to help us move forward, and we ask the people, don't bring in things that are just causing, lighting a fire for a fire's sake. And it is a difficult one to control, but getting leadership on board with that, or taking responsibility for raising it in your team meeting, would be a good start.
And I think just one other thing I might add, that was a really great list. Thanks, Diane. But one other thing, you might even consider, just appointing one person to review, the Department of Health website that has an update every day, and also the Safe Work New South Wales website that has an update every day. And they can just share, what meaningful has happened, because it is ridiculous what's being shared across social media. I think there's plenty of reasons to get off, much of social media, because honestly, the rumours and stuff I've seen there are just totally unhelpful. So go to the trusted sources. I also include the ABC as part of that. But what I really like is these daily updates, and they're proper daily updates endorsed by the government, so you know that it's it's right.
Thank you, Graham and Diane, for that. Graham, someone has mentioned that they would like you to explain a little bit more how to better ask someone, are you okay?
Yeah, it's and again, when we first started off, that was, the big question, how do I ask? And I'm scared that someone might not be okay. I think the most successful way is to make an observation about the change you've seen in someone. So they might be, might have a different tone of voice. Their body language might be different. They might be less reliable. They might be more negative than normal. And to have a one-on-one, and it can be a Zoom, it can be a FaceTime, but just make that observation. Look, I've noticed that, you just don't seem yourself. You just seem a little less reliable in getting your reports on time. That's not like you. And so make it really around the behaviour that you've observed, and then just say, are you okay and everything okay? The next step is listening without judgment. And I think this is really, really paramount, because very rarely is the first thing offered the real picture. And so just ask open-ended questions. And what you might find is something completely different. Someone could be turning up to work late, but when you ask why, you find out that, they haven't been sleeping, and you'll find out why they haven't been sleeping. It's because their sister's become an ice addict. Again, turning up for work and having a sister an ice addict is very, very different. And once people feel understood, the greatest our capacity to influence them. And so we encourage them to take action, encourage action, and to take one little step. It could be to call a helpline, or to call a trusted friend, or see a GP, or go to a self-test on the site. And then finally, it's follow up or check in, and just see, a couple of days later, if they have taken that one step. It shows you care, and the chances are much greater if they do. So just in summary, that forms a acronym ALEC. So A is to ask, are you okay? L is to listen without judgment, E is to encourage action, and C is to check in.
Thank you, Graham. That was a great answer. So I'd just like to move on to the final thank yous. So today's been supported by AV 24/7. They're an awesome audiovisual production company, been around nearly 20 years, and they have pivoted to fully online now. They have actually done this webinar complimentary today because they understand how mental resilience is really important. And Libby, who runs the company, a capable team, have done a great job in supporting us as well. In terms of next steps, the recording will be available to you, and we will be sending the takeaways via Zoom. That will come out in the next couple of days. And please feel free to give us some feedback on SurveyMonkey. We do regular webinars. We've always done regular events for our communities. So we're really keen to hear what you'd like to hear more about, more training. And also, just in terms of Parity, Parity Plus, as I mentioned, 10% of our profits go into supporting our community in wellbeing. And so we have our salary survey due to come out in the next couple of weeks, and we have an online virtual leadership forum that is open to Parity's clients and candidates. So if I can finally wrap up and say thank you very much to Diane and Graham this morning. They have, as always, done a phenomenal job, and I'm hoping that they will come back in the next couple of months and do another one because the world is changing so quickly. And a special thank you, as I said, to AV 24/7 for supporting us. The takeaways and recording will be available and sent to you in the next couple of days. Thank you very much.